Valkyrie is your Paladin class equivalent in the world of Black Desert, a class composed of female warriors loyal to the cause of Elion, which is the god of light and fire, which is why long ago, the Valkyrie Academy in Calpheon requires its members to all have red hair, which is a symbol of fire itself. It specializes in heavy armor and close quarter combat using sword and shield, and a huge lance in Awakening. Valkyrie is a great class in 1 vs 1 PvP, having a good gap closers and a reliable grab CC. It also has one of the best, if not the best, frontal guard in the game. The good crowd control, paired with great defense, makes it a nightmare for other classes even if her damage is not first class. The damage problem will later be solved in Awakening form, but that thus comes with its own disadvantages. In PvE, the class is fairly average at the moment. The AoE are not that big, and the main damage dealing skill are often be in cooldown. Its main saving grace is its high defense and having the best single cast heal in the game, giving the Valkyrie a longer grinding capability in higher level areas with the least potions needed. However, this does not remove the fact that they grind slowly compared to other classes. They can last longer, but when being challenged by other classes in the same grinding spot, then she will have a problem. In large-scale PvP, the Valkyrie is again fairly average. She does have some supporting skills which are good, but not good enough to change the tides of the battle. Her innate tankiness is also not as good as a giant, and a focus fire from the likes of witches and rangers can easily render her shield broken and deplete her life. Her gap closer skills like the Radiant Charge, however, are as good as always, letting her infiltrate deep into the enemy ranks and grab some high DPS targets. Elion's Blessing also lets her survive longer, even with concentrated attacks, but again, her AoE are not that great, resulting to limited damage even when using the skills to multiple enemies. With the Ascension update, the first evolution of the classes begins, giving them lesser skills but in return, having higher damage and better effectiveness of each of the skills. Now the Valkyrie has pledged itself more with the God of Light and turned into an official Paladin. Wielder of the Divine Sword and Shield, the Paladin cleanses her soul and removes the useless skills she possessed, allowing her to focus more on her strength. Shield Throw, which is one of the main damage dealing skills of a Valkyrie, becomes even more deadly during Ascension. Sword of Judgment is another burst damage skill, which significantly improves the damage while healing you at the same time. Branch damage is also changed from Ahib to Al, and most importantly, it removes the first 2 hits and directly induces the last hit, even without using Shield Chase. The third skill is the Sharp Light. Usually used as a long-range poke during PvP, it retains its range, increases the skill's damage, and buff you with increased attacks, all the while giving enemies debuff like Burn DOT and reduced attack speed, an absolutely great utility skill in PvP. The next one is the Divine Wrath, your fastest AoE damage skill. Then the fifth one is your all-time gap closer, the Radiant Strike, followed by Celestial Spear, which becomes even more deadly in PvP, with a very quick and almost unnoticeable casting while dealing 990% damage on first hit with a knockdown effect. Shield Chase as usual is a no-brainer for Valkyrie and Paladin, which best combos with SOJ. Paladin's version also gives her super armor instead of a forward guard that the Valkyrie have. And lastly, Vok's ultimate skill, which is the Judgment of Light. At level 70, you will also get back the Breath of Elion, which is freaking great supporting skill, healing you and your ally while increasing your defense greatly. In PvE, the class is on a better position. It is a lot more faster now, with a dodge that let her slide for quite a lot of distance, and seeing her having better burst damage. However, her AoE has not changed, and she still has pretty limited AoE range, making her on a disadvantage when being compared to other classes that has ascended or awakened. She's on a better spot now, but still not as good as other classes. In PvP, the Paladin maintains her great advantage in 1 vs 1 battles. Her slides, combined with the Shield Chase, enables her to close the gap against ranged classes or run away quickly against melees, particularly the Titan. For me, she is definitely one of the best melee classes in PvP at the moment, and can play aggressively and keep the pressure or play safely and poke your enemies from time to time. Although overall, Hunters might still be better and easier, but Paladin is also there on top for 1 versus 1 battles. And lastly, for large kill PvP, same old, the Paladin is still fairly average. Although with the higher damage, she can kill a lot faster now, but so as other classes. Breath of Elion is indeed fairly useful, but again, she basically lacks the AoE and range that the top fraggers has to top the kill list of a guild. Elion, the god of light, might be omniscient, but this does not stop his followers to stray from the path of righteousness. The first Valkyrie, Enslar, upon finding the church's plan to unleash Zarka to the world, has turned her back and walked on her own path. Blessed by Elion's guidance, she has awakened herself and cast aside her sword and shield in favor of the Holy Lance, the Lancea. The alternate form of a Paladin, the Lancer is the Valkyrie's awakened form, bringing the huge lance in battle, ever charging forward towards her enemies. She also obtained a larger shield, but unlike the Valkyries, the Lancer's shield is part of her main weapon. Due to the bulkiness of her weapon, which is a giant lance with a titan shield, she becomes slower compared to her Paladin counterpart. Gone are the teaching of the church and the graceful ways to handle the sword. Like the first Valkyrie, the Lancer becomes steadfast in her goal, ever charging forward, like an arrow the size of a human. Though few can withstand these heavy charges, this also makes the Lancer quite easy to read, as her skill has only one direction, and that is all in front of her. Still, her skill names are pretty epic, and they're so difficult to read as well, and I will absolutely be disappointed if the original skill names will be changed comes global release. The first one is the Sanctum Ferret, bashing enemies in front of her, then quickly following up by a series of lance attacks. Purificatone is another shield bash skill that damages enemies while healing you at the same time. The next skill is the Blitz Stab, a quick poke of the lance that rivals the Paladin's Sharp Light skill. Promptness is another stab skill, which lets the Lancer leaps toward her enemies, giving her medium range of attack and super armor while using the skill. It's almost a single target skill though, and more useful in PvP compared to PvE. Hastiludium is the Lancer's equivalent of the Radiant Charge, giving her that cavalry vibes without the need of a horse. Verdict, Lancea Lustate, is the only 360 AoE skill of a Lancer, impaling her lance towards the ground and destroying everything around her, including her enemies. It is a pretty slow skill though, and you might want to be careful using it in PvP. Terra Sancta is another conical AoE skill, which instead of hitting your enemies directly, has the lance hit the earth to send shockwaves in front of her. Noble Spirit is another medium range skill that uses holy energy instead of her bulky weapons, knocking down enemies in front of her. Then we have the Lancer's heal skill equivalent of the Breath of Elion, which you can unlock at level 70. And last but not the least, Sanctitas the Enslar, the ultimate skill of the Lancer, great in both PvE and PvP. This allows the Lancers to mark her target, then jump towards the heaven, then land back like a meteor towards her enemies. The Lancer is also invincible while in the middle of the jump, making this skill all the more OP. Luckily, like most ultimate skill, it has a pretty huge cooldown, and Sanctitas the Enslar is instead normally used as a way to counter enemies' ultimates. As you may have observed, the Lancer's ability are all focused in front of her. Although the range of her skills is absolutely crazy, it still shares the same problem with the Paladin, having a fairly limited AoE. This is why I consider her to be in the same situation with the Holy Sword Bearer. The Lancer does usually have higher damage than the Paladin, but she is slower and clunky, which balances them out during grinding sessions. In PvP, the Lancer is the new giant. Her goal is to stay toe-to-toe with her enemies, keeping up the pressure with almost limitless super armors and crowd control skills. Her damage is also nothing to laugh at, and she can easily obliterate anyone that tries to face her head-on. However, here also lies her weakness, as she usually have one gameplay in mind, and that is to push forward. Even her dashes can only be done in a forward manner, making her very easy to read and counter. Of course, there are ways to counter a counter, making her play more defensively and utilizing Sanctitas to bait out enemies' ultimates, but playing that way is not really her strength, and thus only being effective if a player deeply knows both the Lancer class and the enemy's class as well. She also does not have a grab, which is always a minus in 1 versus 1. Still, a very fun class for an aggressive playstyle, but I rank her lower compared to the graceful Paladin. And lastly, in large-scale PvP, and you literally become a tank here. She's a melee class with a range of a ranger, while having a tankiness of a giant. Although it is never recommended to go in the middle of the enemy pack, the Lancer is one of the few classes that can survive few seconds longer under enemy focus fire, and none can stop her when she decides to do so. However, it is always recommended to play to her strength, utilizing the range advantage to poke her enemies, while the tankiness gives her enough room for some mistakes. Not to mention having a supporting heal, making her very ideal to large-scale wars compared to Paladin. There are of course better classes for these wars, but the support tank feeling of a Lancer is truly very unique. So that's it for now. Will you be playing as a Paladin or a Lancer? Or will you be playing other classes instead of a Valkyrie? Then stay tuned in the next video as we discuss the other classes in BDM. See you guys! Peace!